What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here bringing another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Kamen Rider build, and this is for episode 9. This episode was actually really good. I can't believe some of the things that happened. It answered a lot of questions that I and many people have been asking for many episodes, and also introduced a whole bunch of questions that many of us are probably asking ourselves now, like, what's going on? So the episode is called The Trap of Project Build. And for those who don't remember, last episode it was revealed that Katsuragi's work that he had been researching this whole entire time had been on Project Build, which was the actual work done to create the rider system. For those who don't know, the rider system, basically the whole purpose of it is that it could be used for military purposes, allowing for a fighter that could combat evil, or it could be used for good, but initially was meant for the purposes of evil. At least that's how people saw it as at first. But there's a whole explanation shown with Katsuragi explaining the build system, mentioning like the name and how its origins have to do with buildings and construction, and then showing off build fighting some guardians, and then also showing off a combination which we haven't even seen yet in the show, but I do know that gets introduced later on. By the end of this year it should be introduced, I believe, if not like early next year, which is Smartphone Wolf, which is the combination of smartphone bottle and a wolf bottle, which I don't know if he has either of them, but that is a combination that is in the show. There's a couple of combinations. There's a number of combinations that are coming later on, and there's a bunch of combinations coming out later this month. As far as combinations, I mean like best matches. So as far as things go, what ends up happening is from there, we end up hearing all that stuff about Kamen Rider build and everything, and then we hear this conversation with Ryoga and Sento talking about the hazard levels. Now this is something that I've been wondering for a while. What are the hazard levels? Why does it matter? So there's an actual big reason why the hazard levels matter. So what's explained is that, as we know, if some people who are exposed to nebula gas die, those people have a hazard level of a 1, meaning that they're not strong enough to resist it, and that means that they just die. If you're a 2, that means that you are able to turn into a smash monster. So all the smash monsters in these previous episodes, they were 2s, the people that they originated from. If you're a 3, though, you are a person that can access a build driver. If you're somewhere in between a 2 and a 3, then you resist, meaning that you don't have the ability to become to access build, but if exposed to nebula gas, you would survive. So you would survive, and you would not turn into a smash monster. You would just basically seem perfectly normal. So that actually explains a lot about why Sento and why Ryoga didn't turn into smash monsters, and actually clearly shows that yes, they never turned into smash monsters, because their levels must have been between 2 and 3, if not higher, which Sento might have been higher technically. So that's great, because we finally get that clarification as to how that works. What I'm also curious about is what happens when it goes to, say, a 4 or a 5 or higher, or is that even a thing? Maybe it's not. Maybe that will lead to like their final forms and stuff like that. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know yet, but I think that that's something to consider as well. But it's not really explained. And eventually they're fighting with each other, and at one point a new bottle is produced. This bottle is the lock bottle, which will not be used until the next episode, when we get to see the next best match for that episode, but it's good to see it now. Anyway, from there, after having their conversation and everything, Sento goes to work. Sento goes to work, but in the meantime, we end up seeing Gentaku talking to a guy named uh, Yozabu Nanba, or actually, I believe Jozabu Nanba. Nanba is part of the Nanba Heavy Industries Company, and the idea is that he invested into FEWZ, and he wants Gentaku to talk to the Prime Minister, which is his father, about the rider system because of its potential to control the world through military power. And the thing is that if he doesn't talk to the Prime Minister, then Nanba is going to inform Saito and Hokuto rather than helping out with Totoro, meaning that the other nations will take over Totoro. So basically, Gentaku has to keep that in mind and talk to his father, but he has trouble with it. As you haven't already noticed, he's struggled a lot with talking to his father in the past, during previous business meetings. And now we're actually getting a clear sense as to why it's important when we see those. Now it makes a little bit more sense as to the significance. So then, from there, we end up seeing Sento talking to some of his colleagues about Katsuragi and whether or not he was a devil scientist and everything. And there's like these two guys that really love and worship in a way Katsuragi. They don't really worship, but they really adore him. Like, they treat him as though he's a great person and everything. And eventually we hear Nariki, I think it is, or something like that, the assistant to Gentaku asking Sento to work overnight. In the meantime, what ends up happening is that we end up hearing from... We then end up seeing Ryoga talking to Mizora, and he ends up asking about her life and about her past and everything. And she's watching a show on TV which shows different girls going to clothing stores and everything. And Ryoga asks, like, do you ever want to, or have you ever gone to these kind of places before? And she had, but what we learn is that apparently, and what happens is that they actually end up going out, which is something that she doesn't do, because if she were to go out, she would be captured in moments. At least that's what she says. But Ryoga wants to treat her nice, and Ryoga is a nice guy. I mean, he really is a nice guy, and he decides to disguise them both as school kids. Like college or high school kids. I believe it's high school kids. And they dress up like that, and they go to stores, and Mizora loves it, and she's having like the best time ever. She dresses up in all sorts of outfits, and she actually wears normal clothing, which I actually like that a lot. It was cool to see. Although I think she's adorable in her night outfits that she wears typically. But eventually, after all that's said and done, at one point even someone recognizes her voice as Mitten, and then they have to run away. So then at that point, we end up having this nice peaceful moment with Mizora and Ryoga, where we get to learn a little bit more about Mizora and who she is, which actually is pretty important, because this is the other big thing that I've been wondering about. How does Mizora really work? So the thing that we learn is that Mizora actually, during the Skywall incident, ended up going into a coma for 7 years. Yeah, 7 years. That's crazy. And she doesn't know all the details as to why, but what she does know is that when she came out of the coma, she had this bracelet on her arm, which we've seen several times in the opening and through several episodes of the show, that she always wears a bracelet. And that bracelet allows her to make bottles. Now, as far as like what she's doing with the bracelet, we don't know. Still not clear exactly as to how the bracelet works, but it allows that to happen. And the thing is that when she started making bracelets, when she started doing bottles, it would take her at least a week for her to recover after she made a bottle. Now it takes her a fraction of the time. But what she explains also is that originally she was working for FEWZ and they made her make bottles all the time, but then Sento became billed and she was taken back by her father, and things were better. And at first she didn't want to make bottles at all because she hated her experience with FEWZ, but because of the fact that Sento because of Sento teaching her things, her outlook on life changed, and she wanted to make bottles, and she really appreciated him. Now we'll get into that more, but first, what ends up happening is that eventually some guardians do appear, and then Ryoga has to fight. And at one point, Mizora is being chased, and she ends up contacting Sento. In the meantime, we then see Mizora confront Night Rogue, which is pretty crazy because that's a big deal. And when she sees him, she has a flashback, meaning that she has seen him in the past, meaning that she probably remembers interactions with him. So that's a big deal. That's actually a really big deal that she knows of Night Rogue. So additionally, what ends up happening is that she faints. Ryoga goes to save her, and then Bloodstar comes over and lets them go. And then in the meantime, after both of those groups disappear, we then have Sento appear in his comics form, going up against some guardians, and he uses the fire skill to defeat them. Then at that point, back at the base, what ends up happening is that Ryoga and Mizora talk to each other, and we get to hear more about how much Sento really does care about Ryoga, and about how he created the dragon, the custom dragon that he gave to him because he wanted to use it as a guide for him, and really wanted to foster a connection with him, and showed how much he cared. And in a lot of ways, it really showed that Sento is a really good person. He's not a bad guy. He's really not. So it shows a lot. So then, and this also eventually leads to Ryoga realizing that he should really be more friendly to Sento and become buddies. I mean, the thing is that they're friendly, but they butt heads like crazy. This was his revelation of how good a person Sento really is. So then, eventually, what ends up happening is that we see Sento, and he's kind of exhausted because he had to work an all-nighter, and he ends up noticing his colleagues. Well, one in particular, and during the time that Mizora and Ryoga talking, and what happens is that Sento ends up confronting his colleague, who actually ends up using some knockout gas to knock out everyone in the Totoro Institute, and put in some codes to access some information, because earlier in the episode, Gintaku talks to Bloodstar about Nanba, and also about how a plan that he has to steal the Pandora box to deal with the current situation regarding the rider system, and just in general dealing with the other nations. So what happens is that he puts in these codes, this guy Kawada, I think it is, and Kawada then suddenly has this bottle in his hand. He twists the cap and becomes a Smash Monster. Now that's interesting because he actually is using a bottle this time, which in a lot of ways the bottle kind of reminds me of the ones from the Switch ones from Kamen Rider FEWZ, when they would always have the switch that they would press, and then they'd become the the different monsters from that show. So it's kind of interesting to see that. And anyway, what ends up happening is that he ends up fighting the Kawada, which is interesting, in the Smash form. And what ends up happening is that Kawada is that he's using Hawk Gatling. He's doing pretty well. And then at one point, what ends up happening is that Sento uses Lion Cleaner, which is the combination of Lion and Vacuum, which are two different things he's already used before, because the Lion's used normally to summon the bike for his phone, and the Vacuum he's used for a couple of combinations throughout the show already. So it was just a matter of time before we got to see the best match, which, yeah, it's Lion and Vacuum. Go figure. But anyway, he does end up feeding Kawada, and then he ends up getting this bottle. Then what happens is that we end up seeing some pretty big reveals at the very end. The reveals I'm talking about are that apparently Nanba and Sawa are working together, and she has been feeding him pictures and information about Kamen Rider Build. Yeah, she has been working undercover and actually been a bad guy this whole entire time, it sounds like, which is pretty wild to say the least. Yeah, we thought that she was working for some sort of news report thing. No, she was working for Nanba, which is really interesting because Nanba seems like a pretty bad guy. So then we end up also seeing, and like she shows him pictures of him in his Hawk Gatling form and a couple of other forms, which is crazy. And then after Kawada turns into after the essence is taken or whatever, what do you call it? Kawada has this other bottle and he says, "My mission is complete and someone else will take over. I had orders to do more, but I am fine." And we end up seeing that apparently his whole mission was to distract Sento so that the other colleague could go in and access everything so that they could steal Pandora's box. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. But Kawada's last words to Sento before he presses on another bottle this time, which actually will kill him, like he's going to disappear, is he says that Katsuragi is still alive. Yeah, that's a thing. So that's about it, but pretty crazy. Yeah, Katsuragi's still alive. Obviously, people would think if that's true, maybe Bloodstark. I don't know. I'm hoping it's Bloodstark myself. I'm still not entirely convinced that it is, but I would kind of hope so at this point. The only question is, why hasn't he turned human, and why haven't we ever seen him as Katsuragi? I don't know the exact details. I don't know why he hasn't shown his face. We'll see. The other thought that people have been saying is that he might also be the Spider Smash, because later on in the season, there's going to be a third villain character who's going to be introduced. It's going to be a Smash. Because if you haven't noticed, the three villain characters, Night Rogue, Bloodstark, and there's going to be a third one, which will be coming later. But each one of these are based on the first three monsters from the original Kamen Rider. So Bloodstark having to do with a bat. Night Rogue has to do with a bat. There's a spider one, and Bloodstark's, which I'm forgetting right now. But the point is that it's pretty interesting. I'd love to know your opinions. Did you guys enjoy this episode? Are you looking forward to episode 10? Also, I know that episode 11 is going to be the episode that's going to introduce Ryoga finally getting the build driver, which is pretty cool. So we'll see that soon, which is great. I can't wait to see him become that form. But I'd love to know your opinions. Are you guys enjoying the show? Were you excited to see all the new information we got to see today? Leave your comments below, and please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.